with that, I would like to invite Mike up. Let's give him a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Courtney, I really appreciate the excitement and interest about this, although I want you to know that during my time in working with the Obamas, I had an opportunity to first get to... How's that? Thank you. I need that kind of feedback, so I appreciate it. You know, we come from a call and response culture, so talk to me. Jim, I do community engagement work in Hyde Park and Woodlawn, so I am used to people talking to me, not so good. But I was saying that I had the privilege of getting to know the Obamas when they were just an engaged couple, when I was a very nervous, newly accepted into the University of Illinois Law student, and got to know Michelle Robinson, and of course will continue to insist that as the world is finding out that, let's face it, she's the best. Right? And but I learned very early on during my time working with them and for them not to follow them. But since you guys planned this the day after she completely took over the city of Chicago, thanks a lot. I do want to give really a special thank you though to Graham Grady. I was really pleased that everybody had the chance to go around and introduce themselves, because I had a chance to see Graham back there, and I'd say a couple things about Graham. One, I get a lot of invitations to do a lot of things, which is great. It's one of the privileges of my role. It was Graham that really told me just how important to the life and the future of the city this organization is. And so I had an opportunity to really prioritize this, although Lindsay had to be very flexible and patient with me as we got it done. So thank you, Graham, for giving me this opportunity to come and get to address and get to know this group. But also, I spent some time after moved from Chicago to Washington, D.C., spent almost 2 decades in D.C., went into the wilderness in Los Angeles for a couple of years to work in the private sector, and then got called back into service. And when you come back to Chicago, after having been away for a while, we need friends. And Graham has been a friend, so this also gives me an opportunity to publicly say thank you, Graham, for being my friend and a mentor and a guy I appreciate it. I just think the topic of bridging the hope gap is something that we are incredibly focused on, obviously, at the foundation, and it relates to so much of what we're doing. Ideas that we're having around economic impact, programming, and much more. But more specifically, with the creation of the Obama Presidential Center on the South Side, we're really working closely with local leaders to create what we hope is a new approach to economic development in connection with a large-scale real estate project. Now, this work has been ongoing for long before we ever thought about bringing the OPC to the south side of Chicago. We know it's been ongoing because President and Mrs. Obama were a part of it just a few years ago, before they got on the rocket ship ride they were on for, I'd say, about 8 to 10 years. So they're very familiar with the work that has been done in Chicago, particularly in that community, for economic development. But we know that the OPC is, and the Obamas have designed it and meant it to spark new energy and bring new opportunities to plans that otherwise would have taken years, decades potentially to come into fruition, or perhaps never. And so I thought with what Graham and others have told me about what you all do, I'd take some time to dig into the planning so that you'll know what the OPC is all about and how we see our role as a new neighbor on the south side as we work to bridge that gap. So our mission at the foundation is to inspire, empower, and connect people to change their world. Now, we don't define specifically how you make that change. Some may decide to be active in their PTA. Maybe people want to follow and get engaged in the day-to-day news and the work that's being done so that you can be an informed voter. Maybe people want to volunteer with a program that's in their community, mentoring young people, or some want to start a new initiative at their city or something else. But what we want to do is help everyone who we touch discover and carry out what that means for them. And the OPC will be the heart of where we live out this mission, and President and Ms. Obama have been very clear with us and very clear with the public about their goals and vision for the center. They chose, and I want to make sure I land on this point because they had a lot of decisions to make, but they chose to bring this project to Chicago, a city that they love, and specifically to the south side of Chicago to give back to a community that they love and that has given them so much. So we see this as a historic opportunity for Chicago and Illinois, and I really take this theme personally because I'm a child of a couple of school teachers, divorced school teachers. And the only reason that I'm standing here is because of the love and attention and energy that they and so many others poured into me, but also because others before I was even thought of built institutions, public institutions that were available for me. Libraries, museums, parks, cultural spaces. It is one of the best things about our city. And we think this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, unless, one of y'all's kids is going to run for president, win, and come back and do something in Chicago. For now, from what I can tell, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build a world-class museum and a public gathering space where people from all over the world can come to study our nation's first African-American president and first lady, just steps away from where he began his career, where she was raised, and where together they made their home. That's special. That can only happen here in this place at this time, and that's how we see it. And so we really do believe that our goal, our mission is to create a new cultural destination on Chicago's south side. We expect, and we have estimations that we believe are conservative, to draw around 600 and 760,000 visitors every year. Where this is located in Jackson Park, right near the most heavily visited museum currently in our city, the Museum of Science and Industry, and Lake Michigan, and building a campus around this center to create more connectivity in the area and a place of life and vibrancy for our visitors and our neighbors on the south side. Now, Jackson Park was designed by famed landscape architect, as you know, Frederick Law Olmsted, partner of Vaugh, and was once home to the World's Fair. The park has seen significant changes over the years, including the addition of a somewhat beloved, particularly if you live around there and have to commute, 6-lane highway that runs right through the park today. With our design, we intend to reconnect this park, creating a contiguous space for kids to safely run and play, and people in the community to have access to the lake. I was born, as I was telling my table, on about 79th and King Drive on the south side of Chicago, but I grew up in kind of an immigrant neighborhood called Uptown on the north side of Chicago. Not a lot of resources, frankly, in either neighborhood during the time where I was growing up. But I remember now that I'm doing this project that we had something at Uptown that we didn't necessarily have in Chatham. When I was on the north side of Chicago, I could get on my bike, I could ride to the lake, and the entire city was open for me. We want folks on the south side of Chicago and beyond to have that type of connectivity. Come into the campus, get to the lake, and have the entire city opened up to you. It's an experience that we believe all members of our city, all of our citizens deserve and should be able to enjoy. And so we are creating a design to really prioritize the preservation of parkland. It's a 19.3 acre site within the 500 acres of Jackson Park. And the design of this project creates a footprint for our buildings that are just 2.6 acres of our site, with the rest being open and accessible parking. Most of that campus will be free, open, and designed specifically to be welcoming spaces for the community that will engage everyone from the young to the young at heart to learn and to be inspired. Features will include amenities like outdoor play areas, a sledding hill, a branch of the Chicago Public Library, an indoor athletic and program center, indoor community spaces like an auditorium and meeting rooms, open landscape outdoor spaces to provide a quiet, restorative park experience for those who see it so much that you get today if you happen to enjoy and frogger your way across Cornell Drive. You can enjoy a quiet, restorative park experience with walking and biking trails and gardens throughout. So that's what we are hoping and planning to design and create in Jackson Park. At the heart of these amenities, the center will also feature a museum that really centers President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama into American and African American history, and inspires visitors to take on change in their own communities. President Obama has said that his story could only have happened on the south side of Chicago, and was made possible because of all who came before him. As a result, the Presidential Museum at the center is not only going to capture and celebrate Barack Obama's historic path to the presidency, but it's also going to frame it in the larger story of American history, including a spotlight on our city's prominent role in, for example, civil rights movement, and its deep history of community engagement. Working in collaboration with the National Archives and Records Administration, the museum at the Obama Center is going to display a range of important artifacts: manuscripts, correspondence, books, campaign memorabilia, and more. And it'll also include the fun stuff too, although I will say I'm like one of those presidential geeks, so that stuff I just said was fun, but not everybody's into that. And we don't want, as he said, kids like kind of dragged to the Obama Museum. So we'll have fun stuff too. You know, really symbolic items, like President Obama's signing pens. My son, one of my children is autistic, and one of my most treasured items is a pen that I have where he signed legislation to deepen the level of resources that went to the autistic population in our country. So I have one of those pens, and I'm really thrilled that people have the opportunity to see kind of symbolic items like that. The First Lady's dresses. She said yesterday that, you know, as she was speaking, I heard her say that, you know, like she's got a little bit more to offer the world than like what shoes she happens to be wearing. Her dresses were spectacular, and they told a story. And so they'll be there, a full-scale replica of the Oval Office, where children might sit at the residence desk and imagine that one day they too could be President of the United States. I want to talk a little bit about where we've been in bringing this project to life, where we are today, and where we're headed next, because I understand we've got a few planners in the audience. So in May in 2017, we released our initial design visit for the Obama Presidential Center. And we did that in a way with a timing to spend the next year participating in meetings big and small to gather input on the design, the programs, and broader opportunities. We held no less than 8 public meetings. We met with community groups, stakeholders, in large groups, small groups, one-on-one. I've been in apartment buildings. I spent a little time with our friends at the Vista Homes Co-op. Good to see you. We have been in basements of grocery stores, churches. We have been in thousands of meetings about this project. We have read thousands of online submissions. People think, that online stuff, well, nobody reads. It's the Obama. We read the digital, online stuff, and incorporate that into our work. And there's so many people who want to engage just in that way, as well as meeting people where they are. And one of the things that is special, I think, about Chicago is in the summer the city comes alive. And so we went to fairs and festivals all around the city with little booths and walking around, just taking in feedback, asking questions, taking notes. It's been quite an energizing process, and one that I think belies the word that you hear that people don't care, that people are disengaged. It's a lie. I've seen it and I've lived it in this city over the past year and a half. And I think most importantly, this input has informed changes to our design. We've changed the look of the museum building. We changed the location of our parking facility. And all of these changes went through the process. And so we submitted it to a plan, as a part of our plan development application to the city of Chicago in January of this year. In May of 2018, after a public review period, we received approval for the plan development and zoning from Chicago City Council. And then at the end of just last month, in October, the City Council unanimously, and one of my little secret sayings for the team is, it doesn't count if it's not unanimous. Which, as you can tell, as you can guess, they love that. They don't love that. The City Council unanimously approved our use agreement, outlining how the Obama Foundation will exist as a public benefit in keeping with the other museums in the park. And there are a few key points that I want to highlight on this use agreement because I think it's important. One, the Obama Foundation will fund the construction of the buildings and then transfer ownership rights of the center to the city of Chicago. Two, in exchange, the city will give the Obama Foundation the right to occupy the land subject to requirements for public access and public use. And three, we, the Obama Foundation, will bear sole responsibility for funding the operations of the center. We will not receive ongoing operating and capital subsidies like other museums in the park. And further, in the use agreement, just like other museums in the park, we will provide substantial public benefits, including admission pricing for city residents and low-income families that are consistent with the other museums in the park, as well as free days and free admission for students that come with teachers, hopefully not dragged, but some might be dragged, as required by the Museum Act. But this agreement was about the land and how we were operating, yes, but it was much more than that. This agreement allows the OPC to bring new resources and amenities to the people on the south side of Chicago. We could not be more excited about that. And the unanimous vote, we think, is a reflection of how enthusiastic both city leaders and residents across the city are about this project. We think so much, and it's so true, about how divided the city is. Let's take a moment to celebrate this city coming together to do something great, particularly for a community that has so often felt neglected, forgotten, and left behind. I'm excited about that. Still, before we can officially break ground in Jackson Park next year, we have one more hurdle to get through. Various proposed park projects around and including the Obama Presidential Center and the accompanying roadway changes are within historic Jackson Park, and so they require a federal level environmental review. under what's called the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. See, I love this audience. You guys are policy geeks. You're right here with me. You know, sometimes when I get to NEPA, like, the eyes start to glaze over a little bit. You guys are like, NEPA, yes, got it. That's also has consultation under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. These are two separate processes, NEPA and the Historic Preservation Review, with different procedural requirements. We are expecting an assessment of effects from this review soon, and we believe it will help us improve and refine our project. Now, this process has been thorough, and in Chicago style, it has been robust. And we wouldn't have it any other way. We are looking forward to making the Obama Presidential Center a reality for Chicago. A reality in particular for Chicago's south side, but cascading out to the west side of Chicago, the north side, the suburbs and beyond. And we expect to break ground next year with our doors opening in 2022. Now, I want to take some time to talk also with you about the tremendous economic opportunity that we have in front of us with this project. The OPC is estimated to have an economic impact of $3.1 billion in Chicago alone and create thousands of jobs through the center's construction and operations. In addition, thousands more indirect and induced jobs will be created by the influx of these over 700,000 visitors to the OPC on a yearly basis. It's a once-in-a-lifetime, I said it before, I will just say it again, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for our community. And we know that while a major investment like this is positive, it also brings with it challenges. And these challenges, they have to be addressed. They have to be articulated. It's going to be messy. It's going to be noisy. People are talking about their lives are at stake here and how they live their lives. And we have to listen to them. And this conversation has to happen. And it can't happen behind the scenes. This has to be a public conversation and one that everyone has a stake in and an opportunity to participate. And I do mean everyone. In particular, and I just want you to be aware of this because you may have heard the noise but may not have kind of paid attention to the details of the music here. There are people who have called this community home for generations that are worried about staying in their neighborhood. They've seen what I was in Washington, D.C. as so much of Washington, D.C. developed and redeveloped. And I saw people have to move out of their homes and out of their neighborhoods and out of their communities that they love. You look at 606. You look at other projects that we've had, in our city's history. The creation of the University of Illinois in Chicago. I'm a proud Illinois graduate, but that community looks different today than it did when they started that project, 40, 50 years ago? The University of Chicago and the work that they are doing today is informed by a very painful history. And so we have to have this conversation and we have to be able to address with sincerity, without happy talk, without BS, the concerns of people who are concerned about living and moving in homes and communities that they have been in for a month or a year or generations. And now look, this is hard. I think in part because this is new. As we've gone around the country and looked at other examples of how large projects have impacted urban, primarily African American communities, we don't have a lot of great examples that we can look to that we think are successful in the way that our community would define success. And so there is no roadmap. And if anybody has one, would you please share it with me on how to support an urban community that has had historic underinvestment with a presidential center while maintaining the character of that community? So how are we going about it? We're going it Obama style. We are working collaboratively with community members to be a good neighbor, doing a lot of listening because we are also here. And we also plan to stay here. We're not always going to be perfect. He always has said that. But We're going to have an open door. We'll be ready to listen. And we're going to be ready to act on what we hear. But we also say, we don't say, you know, yes, you can, Obama. I remember the phrase being, yes, we can. And so we believe that there is an intense role and we have a seat at the table for the community to participate in creating its own future. And that's where a new organization comes in that's called Emerald South. So with the future OPC coming to Jackson Park and other new development projects in the area, community leaders, not us, not the mayor, community leaders from Woodlawn, Washington Park, and South Shore. If you don't know those neighborhoods, get to know them. Come visit them. They got great food. They got great people. They got great stuff happening. Don't be as they say back in my home. Don't be scared. Right? Don't be scared. You'll be all right. Come on to the south side of Chicago and get to know these neighborhoods now, right? So that you can help us maintain the character of them as we create something together as a city. These leaders decided to come together and create an organization focused on spurring new and impactful investments in the local community, and the Obama Foundation is excited to be a founding member of Emerald South with just one seat at the table. Now, to be done well, we all know in this room, and I know politicians always say we all know, but I think we all know that economic development requires a comprehensive and community-led approach. It's not something that can be done by any single individual or organization. So our intention is to be a part of that process and to do it in collaboration with those around us. There are people who have worked in this space for decades. This community has been planned to death. There are plans on top of plans on top of other plans for economic development. What hasn't happened is there hasn't been a catalyst and an attention to move those plans forward and put them into reality. And so we have local organizers who demand to be a part of planning the future of our community, as well as city and county leaders who have been elected to represent and engage in the future of their communities, and other institutional players. Our friends at the University of Chicago are here with me at the head table. They have done incredible work to create an environment in which people can see that we aren't just talking about economic development. We're doing it. Things are on the move. Now, that creates for us a real sense of urgency to address these issues of economic development because things happen quickly, and we don't want to be behind the curve. And we want to also ensure that we're making the most of this opportunity, and believe me, we know our neighbors do too. So in the months and years ahead, Emerald South is going to be focused on 3 primary initiatives: bolstering commercial corridors and local businesses, cross-coordinating often overly siloed workforce development efforts, and supporting an inclusive housing strategy. Now, in addition to drawing hundreds of thousands of people to the South Side every year, the center is going to support thousands of construction and permanent jobs. And our decision that the president made was to develop an ambitious diversity and inclusion plan that prioritizes jobs and training for underrepresented populations. And I really do, she mentioned it before, but I do really want to thank the Sawyer family for bringing their deep expertise, love for this community, and ability to get SHIT done to our project so that we can make the impact that we know we need to make on diversity and inclusion, particularly with these underrepresented and often underserved populations. So our goal on this one is we're going to develop a new path. We're going to develop a new way to overcome long-standing obstacles to creating a workforce that reflects the diversity of the community that we're creating this center in. We want to create a new model for diversity and inclusion that can be embraced by you and other projects across this city and beyond, providing opportunities for these folks to have meaningful, well-paying careers. Not just jobs, but careers, and our construction manager, the Lakeside Alliance, has committed to ensuring that at least half, 50% of the worker hours on this job are performed by our residents. That is that's a steep, tough commitment, particularly considering the complexity of what we are creating at the Obama Presidential Center. And so I will tell you, we're going to need your help if we're going to meet that goal. This is one where you can't sit on the sidelines if you want us. You can't say, boy, that's really ambitious. Good luck, man. Hope you get that done. Because success in this is going to be success for us. If we're able to do this, it's going to create a model and a pipeline of talent for people to get engaged in the real estate projects all across the city and the region. And so we have developed a set of principles that are going to design our work, along with a set of very specific, written, time-bound commitments that were demanded by our neighbors in our community. They live in a document that'll be constantly updated with boxes checked, and progress recorded. It's right now on our website, obama.org, that we will consistently update with new commitments so that our neighbors and fellow Chicagoans can track our progress, hold us accountable, and as they are often want to do, offer feedback as we embark on this historic endeavor together. So in closing, I do want to thank you for joining us, and I really want to thank you for inviting me to be with you here today. As you can tell, I think this is a critical conversation that we should begin today, but that we really need to continue as we work towards making the Obama Presidential Center a reality for Chicago's South Side. So I will end with something I did in the middle with a plug. Some of you out here may not have had an opportunity to visit this community. I really want you to visit. I want you to visit when the center is built, for sure, but I want you to come now so that you can see that there is prosperity and potential across this city, not just in a few neighborhoods. The Obamas have decided to bet on the South Side of Chicago. We need everyone here to bet on these communities. Bet on these communities on the west side, on the south side, on the north side. Bet on your fellow Chicagoans. Bet on your fellow citizens. We know that rethinking urban development and the way it's done is challenging and important work, but we're counting on everyone to do their part. And as the late, great Stan Lee said, Excelsior. Which I'm happy to
Point, Corey.
Thank you.
I was curious about, we were just talking about other presidential libraries
Yeah.
and the presidential center that's in Springfield for Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
If there's any planned connections between the two, even if that's just, you know, advertising about taking the Amtrak down to Springfield
Yeah.
and also seeing that library.
I don't know, anyone who hasn't been to the Lincoln Library in Springfield should go. It is cool. They've done a really great job of bringing that history alive, and as if you listen to any President Obama speeches when he was in office or running for office, he really saw his connection to that story. And so we've already begun to develop a really fun relationship. One of the things that we've seen with other presidential libraries is often they have to create a constant set of exhibitions in order to kind of keep the visitor experience alive. And so they did something about Illinois connections with presidents. Ronald Reagan, President Reagan has a connection to downstate Illinois and others. And so we added some exhibits to that and are participating as well. And it was really fun to see, in particular with all of the drama and discord that was often so much a part of what happened in Springfield with our state legislator, to see those legislators sort of come together and support the work that we want to do at the Obama Center. And so, we think there's already something great there. And creating a visitor experience, I think, is at the top of the list of things that we can do between now and 2022 when we open our doors. So yes, and I think, again, this is just something I haven't been a part of before, and probably many haven't. And so I continue to ask people, and you are already there, to not think of this thing in a narrow way. there have only been 45 of these dudes. Unfortunately, there were only dudes right now, but you know, that I have faith that that'll be fixed at some point soon. And so this is global. This is kind of, I even talked about, you know, with my neighbors in Woodlawn, like, this is global. This is bigger than us. And sometimes when people think about those things, even myself, I think human nature is to kind of close in. But if we can together just sort of open up and think about possibilities, particularly at a time when I think in the city we don't often think about possibilities. We think about, like, you know, what can be done, what's being done to us, who's doing it to us, right? This should be one thing where we can all come together and think about what's possible. And I think in thinking about what's possible will give us the opportunity to imagine something, which I think is the only way to innovate with something completely new. And so thank you for that question, because it gave me an opportunity to get on my soapbox.
I understand there has been a lawsuit that's filed trying to block the use of parkland. Can you brief us on the status of that?
Sure. So there's a group that's called Protect Our Parks. It often gets confused with the group called Friends of the Park, because so many people in Chicago have the Lucas Museum project in mind. So this is different in many ways, and I'll give you the briefing and I'll point out what's different. So the group Protect Our Parks has sued the city of Chicago and different elements within the city of Chicago, including the Park District, and they believe that they have many arguments, but I think I would say the core of their thrust is that this is an improper use of park space. And it's in front of a federal judge, and they had a hearing recently in which the federal judge said this case is not going to linger, they're going to move it along, and professionally. So that's moving forward. We're obviously incredibly interested in it because it affects our work intensely. You know, we feel incredibly strongly about the fact that this is not only a really fabulous use of parkland, but that it is completely consistent with the Museum Act, the law, and the way that the city has used parks. It's a museum, it's a public space, it's a presidential museum, which is pretty public in nature, and we have gone out of our way and out of our way quite enthusiastically to make sure that the public has access to the parkland continually, and that this is not something that's being turned over to a private institution like the Obama Foundation, that the public's going to own the Obama Presidential Center, but not have to spend rare and scarce public resources to run it and operate it. We're doing that. So we feel really strongly about it, and we're just going to, you know, we're going to continue our planning and continue our work while we assume and keep our eye very closely on the litigation and have it run its course. So that's our plan, and you know, I think we think that there'll be I think an additional sort of dispositive opportunity with the lawsuit within the next few months. So stay tuned.
Hi. So I'm so impressed by the concept of community and sort of trying to fold this in and benefit the community. It makes me think of two other big sort of investments that we're making as a country that have recently come about. Foxconn, $3 billion, $2 billion for Amazon. I wonder how, because we're a land economics organization, how you think about that as an investment,
Yeah.
how community fits in that,
Yeah.
where do you think the better path lies?
You know, I this is now just, you got me a question where you're going to get my views on this thing. I think that there is a level of distrust that has been earned. I think that and earned distrust is dangerous in marriages, it's dangerous in friendships, it's dangerous in business relationships, and it's dangerous in a city with a community. And I think that and what I would caution people is that in our urgency to try to bring much needed economic development to our city and to particularly communities that have been screaming for these economic opportunities. You know, I can't walk into a family reunion after having earned the distrust and say, hey, you know, look at all this great stuff I'm bringing you. Because I think folks' reaction will be, I would assume this is going to be as bad for me as the last stuff has been bad for me. And you telling me that it's good for me is raising my skepticism, because you said the last stuff was going to be good for me. And so I think that whether it's whatever kind of economic development investment that we're making, I think that there has to be a lot of listening that starts off first so that people can test and see whether you're serious about what it is that you do. I think you also have to create some early wins so that folks don't feel like they just have to suffer while you're talking, or that you're running out the clock. And I also think, and I think this is particularly with young folks, who I've just been, you know, in the Obama White House, we had an opportunity to kind of be run by often a real generation of very intense people who were really into public service and community. And I think that, and I know this is scary for me, I'm gonna be 50 next year, so I'm gonna talk like I'm a middle-aged dude, because my knees feel like I'm one. It can be scary when you have a lot on the line to create meaningful opportunities for those who are outside of your control to have influence of what it is that you're doing. But we're just in a different world. It's sort of like, you know, you can give them some control, or they can get some control by stopping you from doing what it is that you're wanting to do, or deeply cramping your plans. And so I think that the more and I think we're all just figuring it out, frankly, as we go along, but the more we give people a meaningful seat at the table, not require that they have to be polite in order to have one, but the only requirement is we have the same values and we want good things to happen. I think the messiness, people trust that more than the cleanness. And particularly in the world that we're in right now. So I don't have a lot of theories on, you know, what projects were great and what projects weren't. I want investment on these neighborhoods. I want them to come now. I want people to be better. I want all this stuff to happen. I just think in many ways process can be as important or almost more important than the planning and the project. And if the process can inform the planning and the project, I think it has the opportunity to end up with something more sustainable and lasting. And you know, that comes from, I know you guys are hearing it now. I've been around Barack Obama for a long time, so he's gotten it in my head. But that's the way I think we should approach it.
You mentioned physical planning just for a minute, and I just wanted to ask you, with the abandonment of the loop that really goes through the park, and now putting a lot more traffic on Stony Island, and also the traffic that's going to be generated by the center, Stony Island is now really going to be a barrier to the community to the west. How are you really going to address all the traffic that's now going to be on Stony and all the accessibility to the center?
Sure. Well, luckily, you know, traffic and movement of people is felt as a gigantic emotional challenge, particularly if you live there. Where I live, if somebody was building something across the street, my emotions would be incredibly high, and I want to make sure that they were listening to me. The good news is that much of this is a planning issue and a math issue, right? You plan out, you do projections, you do pretty conservative or aggressive projections about the anticipated traffic. And you make roadway changes and transportation changes to do it. And frankly, as I have worked in this in that community, what I've heard is that there are things that have been underinvested in that neighborhood for a really long time. Sidewalks, crossings, streetlights, walkways, bike paths, the metro station, bus stations, coordination, roadways. I don't know about you, but every time I try to figure out how to get from one side of the golden statue lady to the other, am I supposed to keep going this way? Should I turn right? Is there a stop sign? One side of Lakeshore Drive was lengthened and added a lane, the other side was not, right? And so luckily we have, and I will put them on the spot because they've been great. We have a traffic engineer, Sam Schwartz, and his team who have put together a set of very intense analysis for which we are creating, and the city in particular has the responsibility to create improvements in order to accommodate the expected traffic to make sure that people there's lives, they're going to be deeply changed. I know that in one sense people might have thought that, you know, they're getting a little small sleepy Obama library, and now they look up and, you know, Mrs. Obama and President Obama want to bring a set of public amenities to that community that they feel like people deserve. There are people who live there now who are like, everything is totally fine the way it is. And there are people who live there now who have said, thank God, somebody, I don't have to bring my child down to Millennium Park to give them a place to play. Thank God. My plans around a new restaurant, a new business, revitalizing 71st Street, 63rd Street, these commercial, Stony Island, these commercial corridors that used to be the best place in the city to come and get something to eat and be with your family. Thank God somebody's coming to spark some investment. And so that's a series of trade-offs. And I think our goal is to use the expertise that we have with Sam Schwartz to make sure that the plans we put in place are realistic and that there's finally real dollars coming based upon the tax money that people there have been paying into the tax base for generations. And so that's our approach to it. And I would say that President Obama's entire message to us is we're not doing this if the plans don't make sense to me. And he's a pretty smart guy, and gets into the details. And so, you know, with real professionals working on it and with pressure testing it, with community members going to multiple meetings, and we'll go to more, we're going to have to come up with something that works. I think we can. Otherwise, we wouldn't have started it.
I think it's